friends. My name is Stephanie Romero, and I am the founder and executive director of Awaken Pittsburgh. I want to welcome you to our podcast, The Ripple Effect. Awaken Pittsburgh is a nonprofit dedicated to fostering well being, empathy, and compassion for all by teaching and encouraging mindfulness and meditation practices. I also want to take a moment to let you know that Awaken Pittsburgh offers many other opportunities for practice and connection. For example, you can join our online community, which features a space to more deeply explore the topics we cover with our guests. We have weekly posts to spark thought, practice, and reflection. I hope you will come join us to explore, connect with others, and deepen your practice. You can find out more at awakenpittsburgh.org. Ashley Cifone is going to be the next guest that we have today on our Ripple Effect podcast. She is a child and adolescent therapist, parent educator, and consultant. Having almost 2 decades of experience working with young children and their families, she's learned a thing or two about the wonders mindfulness can work within a family system. Ashley is guided by anti-oppressive principles and believes deeply that people grow through and towards relationship. Ashley is also working with Awaken Pittsburgh and doing some program delivery with our families and children. And she's been a friend to me for many years, so I'm grateful to have her on the podcast today. Ashley, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. You are, as you know, one of my favorite people. And I think this topic of nurturing is one that we'll talk about that you really embody. So I'm excited to have you with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. And likewise, you're one of my favorite people on the planet. I feel very lucky to know you.
So I love to start every conversation with just asking about the role of meditation and mindfulness in your life. How did you come upon it? What does it look like for you? All the things.
Oh my, thank you. Oh, well, so as the wonder that is social media began to grow, um, I started seeing, I think, little words here and there that kind of like were akin to the mindfulness arena of life. But also, I had just transitioned from being in like a group care sort of environment. I am a child care provider and an educator, and I've had many different titles within that sort of realm. But I switched over to being a nanny because I was extremely burnt out, and I had one little kid who was in his toddler time, and we were just kind of struggling. I was using the tools that I had witnessed being used in the spaces that I was in. And I was coming to understand positive discipline, but without that phrase. And um, I remember we were having a tough moment, and we both just kind of sat down on the steps. And I was like, whoa, you're really pissed off. Sorry if I can't swear, you can bleep it. Um, and I don't usually swear at children either, but I was activated and he was activated, and he just looked at me and went, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh my, I just did something there. What is that?" So I kind of then did a little more digging and was like, I'm just going to kind of name what's happening. And then, of course, I found out that positive discipline is totally rooted in like acknowledgement and validation. And we were able to get on very well after that. And so, even though it's not specifically about mindfulness, I can't view responsive care, positive discipline, any of that without immediately linking it to mindfulness, because we have to be aware of how we're responding, in this case, to the child I was charged to care for. How is what he's going through getting to me? How can I respond to make it not worse for him? Obviously, right? Because I don't want to make his life worse. But that kind of set me on a path of no return after that, of like, there's no more coercion. We're not manipulating. We're going to acknowledge and validate and name and identify things. And we're going to figure this out together. And if that's not rooted in mindfulness, I don't know what is. And so that's kind of how it started. And then as I was getting my nanny legs going, um, I was trying to find opportunities because I was doing this like nanny training. Um, and I needed speakers. And so I happened upon one of your flyers in a coffee shop and then said, huh, mindfulness. Yeah, that sounds kind of like what's going on. And so I remember I called you up, like total cold call, like, hey, you don't know me, want to meet at a Panera and just talk about things. And you met me and gave me so much of like the rich language of what I know now. And so, it started for me in childcare, which is my passion in this life. Um, and then it started with you too.
That's I'm not sure I knew exactly that story, but I knew something of that story. I mean, obviously because I was the one that met you. But I don't know that I knew that whole story, so that was kind of cool. And I also love you're connecting this instinct you had to just name that kid's emotion, right? Name what was happening with some kind of intuitive understanding that later became for you mindfulness.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really wonderful because I think that is the essence of it. And that's, we when we say the definition of what does it mean to be mindful, it's awareness, right?
Hmm.
It's naming what's going on for ourselves and for
Yeah.
others.
Yeah. And I think reflecting on it now, at least on this day, my brain is also kind of like, huh, I think I was holding on to a little bit of perfectionism in that moment with my first like official full-time nanny kid. Um, I had been a caregiver for many years before that. And it's not like when I say no more coercion and manipulation, things weren't terrible. Like I was still my same bubbly self and still my nurturing self with all the kids before, but there were just different tactics, right? Like oh, we can't do this unless, and sometimes that's needed, but it wasn't congruent with my soul and it never felt like it stuck. And then for me, the act of nurturing the growth and development of others became way less fraught when I just took that different approach. And I just feel like it was so much more in alignment. And, no one can see me, but I am a white woman who was raised in America. And so perfectionism is like, oh boy, it's like all steeped in my connective tissue, right? And I think I was holding on to this. I'm not doing a good job caregiving if this child isn't having a beautiful experience every single minute of his life. And if his parents come home and I have to say, oh my gosh, we had a hard moment, that means I'm a failure and it means I'm not a good caregiver. And then yada yada, right? All the intrusive thoughts, you should just quit. You're not good at anything. Um, and so in that moment too, there was, I guess, just kind of this release of like, this is actually a collaboration. I don't have to have all the answers for him. And as I grew in my relationship with this type of nurturing, I started to see also like parents everywhere are probably like, right? Like you can't be perfect at this, even if there was availability for that. Um, the act of like nurturing growth in humans, raising kids, if you will, like it just doesn't leave any space. Like there's no space for perfection because there's just two nervous systems trying to figure stuff out together, right? And I don't think our society supports folks having nervous systems that are perfectly attuned. If we did, mindfulness would not need to exist, right? And so, that this whole experience of me finding not only this sort of more nurturing, responsive parenting, even though I wasn't the parent, obviously, and then finding mindfulness also helped me begin to see the ways that oppressive systems were present in my lived experience. And I started to look for answers on how to release some of that as well. And so they're all, to me, like infused together, at least in my life.
Yeah, no, that there's so much rich stuff in what you were saying there. And what I'm hearing, maybe because it's what I need to hear, is that your perfectionism was not allowing for you to accept that whole range of human experience and emotions because there was a kind of preconceived notion of it had to be a certain way.
Yeah.
If it was good, quote unquote, right? Air
Yeah.
quotes there,
Mhm.
right? And I think we do that to ourselves all the time. And you mentioned social media before. Like, I think social media is the worst about it because everybody else has the most beautiful vacations. Everybody else's kids are receiving reward awards and God only knows what else. Like everyone's life looks so amazing on social media, right? Like I have
Mhm.
I have someone that I know that recently has been raising chickens, and I'm like, I want chickens, like all of the things that maybe we feel like we're not or we don't have or whatever, like it's out there. And that I think is feeding this perfectionism, right? That
Mhm.
like you said is part of white dominant culture and really prevents us from exploring the whole range of human experience and allowing ourselves and each other to have a bad day,
Yeah.
to have big feelings,
Mhm.
to have
Mhm.
complicated feelings, even, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's so beautifully put. I just love you so much. And I'm grateful too that you're bringing in that, like, even that allowing ourselves to experience it. Because when I think about the role that I have, I take it so seriously. Like the kids that I'm with, even now as a counselor, like there's only so much consent that the kids I'm working with have, if any at all. And so I'm in their space. I'm caring for them. I'm helping meet some of their most basic needs and then some of their, higher needs too, hopefully. Hopefully it's not only just like you're not dying every day, so that's good enough, right? But like I'm modeling how to be a person for 8 to 10 hours a day sometimes, or at least in the hour-long sessions that I have in this moment of my life with the kids that I work with. And so modeling that perfectionism again not only continues manifestations of white supremacy being embedded in other people's connective tissues, right? I don't want to be a part of that. Um, but it's also not showing them that, like, yeah, when you're an adult, also things are not very clear. You don't have things figured out. And it allowed me, I think, to reach a whole different level of like connection with all of my nanny kids, and all of my students and hopefully my clients now, right? It's a little different because I'm only seeing them once a week or every other week. So I'm not as infused in their life as I was when I was like the main care provider besides the parents, right? But um, let's when I can be a human too, there's deep connection there. And my view of humanity is so steeped in connection, even though I'm still unlearning a lot of the individualism that I've also been conditioned with. But humans grow through and towards relationships. That's what the founders of this one theory, counseling theory called relational cultural theory, say. Um, their names are escaping me, but it's out there. I love them. And when I heard that sentence too, right, I have these moments where I hear like a little thing, and then I'm like, whoa, like everything's so clear. And it gives me language, which in itself is me practicing mindfulness, being like, yay, now I've got the language for this. Um, and so that release of perfectionism is a practice. It's why I still need mindfulness now. Right. Because we need it forever. Nothing's ever going to be, again, no nervous system's ever going to be perfectly regulated all the time. But the perfectionism thing, it's so, so difficult. And I think too, even in just that sphere of caregiving in itself, right? Unlearning that I need to be perfect at this just because I am a woman. And then it doesn't have to look Pinterest perfect, Instagram perfect, right? Like things could get pretty wild, if I do say, right? Where everyone's sweaty and like red and angry or like maniacally laughing. Like none of that looks Instagram ready. And so I don't know. I think it helps me be a better person too. Like just the whole lot of it all together. When I can be a real thing for the kids in my life, they get to be real things too.
I love that. I love that you're leading with connection, and that the way that you're leading with connection is through authentic presence. Like, there's the language that I have about what you just said, right?
Yeah.
Right? That you're leading with connection, that you're seeing that as like the core, right? Of being human, and that your authentic presence, your whole self is what is going to feed that
Hmm.
and make it deep and make it something that sustains and nurtures us.
Yes.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I know that when I started bringing mindfulness into my classroom space when I was a teacher, that was one of the things that I felt shift, is
Hmm.
that I was able to have more deep, authentic connections with my students. And it's really parallel to what you described in permitting them, like, oh, you're off task today, going up to that kiddo and saying, what's going on? Instead of
Hmm.
you need to go on task because everything needs to be a certain way, right? What's going on? And then hearing from the kiddo, my boyfriend, middle school, my boyfriend broke up with me last period, right?
Yeah.
And like, okay, you're 11, you're 12. That's the end of your little world, right? How
Hmm.
do I give you a little space and a little grace to be with that right now and not whatever that we're doing? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There are 2 points coming to my mind hearing you say this. One is that I so love hearing that you were an educator who was able to recognize that and do that. It heals little parts of little Ashley, right, who had a hard time at school sometimes. And I love knowing that there are educators out there using this. The second point, because it is their world, right? And we have the privilege of like a few extra years to know, oh, it's gonna move so quickly for you. But they're like kids are just the perfect beings to model presence. Oh, because they feel everything when they feel it. And I kind of love that piece of it too, just like the raw humanity that is a toddler, right? And how it does get a little less raw as they get conditioned in everything, right? But it's such a thing to behold. So thanks for giving your students that space when you were there. They're so much better for it. Of course, you know that. The second piece of it is that this act of nurturing by giving space and allowing authenticity and modeling authenticity, um, it can't what I'm seeing in the culture, and I'm now doing air quotes, um, is this commodification of this style of guidance. And it's okay, right? Capitalism gets to everything, which means then, like, how do we put this on an assembly line, regurgitate it quickly to get the results? But it's such an act of, I don't even know the word. You have to do it and it has to be real, or the kids know you're just trying to like, cool, I acknowledged it. Come on. I said, "Oh, that's so sad. Okay, so stop crying," right? And I think that it's giving positive discipline and all of the other names for it, like an interesting sort of reputation. And all I want to scream at the folks kind of putting that out into the world is if you want to stop these behaviors, try these 5 positive discipline tactics. And that's really useful. Everyone's coming from a good place doing that. But I just want to scream, like, you have to slow down. You can't this is not a quick fix. It's total shift in how you approach. And the act of nurturing, not to keep like, I know this is our theme for the day, um, but it's also a theme for my life. Like I'm basing several of my life offerings around this word because it means so much to me, like to care for. the growth and development, and to nurturing as a verb and as an action of offering and trying again, offering and trying again. And so, to hear, see and watch it, how it's changing into being some Instagram palatable thing and not like the work that it actually entails, has been a little interesting. And when you were saying how you brought that into your classroom, it's so beautiful because you allowed the slowness of it, that space, that connecting, right? Connecting, well, sometimes it's instantaneous, right? Sometimes you just know, but you still have to nurture that connection for it to stay strong, right? It's not a fire, it's not a firework over and done. If you want it to be sustained, you have to keep trying. And a lot of that is allowing the space. So I just love that. I love that you shared that. It's just so beautiful. And I think it really kind of embodies the way that it is a practice to nurture other beings in ourselves. You can't just do it.
Yeah, I love so much in what you just said. And the first thing that I want to just call out in what you said is I think you're describing behavior change, right? So sometimes, and I say this all the time on this podcast and in many conversations out in the world, like we believe someone is either nurturing or they're not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But actually, like we all can work towards that. We can all learn different skills. We can all shift the way we behave and show up for one another so that we are more nurturing. Like we can do that if we want to. So I
Yeah.
think like that's exciting for me because if you think of the person, and we're all that person at different moments, right? Who is the least nurturing, right? And like I said, we all have our least nurturing moments. That's that's okay. That's part of humanity too. And we can choose not to do that and like you said, try again,
Yeah.
right? And try again. The other piece that I love that you're talking about is the slowness. And it is reminding me of in Italy, they have the slow food and the slow city movements. I don't know if you've heard of those at all,
No,
but
yeah, I love
it's
it.
all about like getting back to cooking from scratch and not like instant anything and having a whole town that embraces that lifestyle around that where you spend time in the piazza just hanging out having cappuccino or espresso with the buddies and
Mm-hmm.
savoring like really that idea of savoring life of doing things fully and slowly, and a big part of that especially in cultures like Italian culture is connection. So
Yeah.
part of what was coming into my mind is that whole slow food, slow city movement in Italy to really get back to roots of Italian culture that have been being eroded by, I think, American culture of everything
Mm-hmm.
fast, everything quick, fast food, speed dating, all of the
Right.
things.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just gonna say, oh, like, isn't that just what we all long for? And how awesome that this town was like, let's make this like part of our system. So it trickles down. So there's the offering to do that. Again, maybe I'm chronically online. I guess I am a millennial, so perhaps, but um I see so many folks who I see online, like on TikTok, and those algorithms, boy, are they smart. I see tons of gardeners, tons of folks they're trying to get back to that. And the ones who are really super duper air quotes here, succeeding at it, um, they have so much privilege. They're so, so, so privileged, that this is how it is attainable for them. And then it trickles down into, like, I'm going to say most people, I'm going to again air quotes regular people who are maybe not so time rich and resource rich, that they're like, oh god, I guess I'm doing this wrong too, right? It kind of goes back to that sort of like you're getting the snapshot, thing. How do I get this snapshot of this? And it's like, well, no, you have to be like rich to do it because our society does not support this. um you know and so that sounds so beautiful, and that is like nurturing in a word. And I long for when we figure that out over here, and then the powers that be can allow it to be our reality. I try to stay hopeful about it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think for me, just as an example, like there are moments in my life when I don't have time and space to really sink into slowness, right? Like I was just talking to you before we started recording about deadlines that I have coming up, right? That's real. That's part of our reality. So I have to speed things up and I have to get that done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I also love, for example, this past weekend, making homemade scones, and just like feeling the dough and that
Yeah.
whole or baking bread. I love making focaccia, and that takes time. Like you got to let it rise
Mm-hmm.
twice. That kind of a thing. And so our modern world demands a certain amount of speed, and to live in the modern world, we have to kind of get sucked into that. And can we create those spaces for ourselves? Like that's
Yeah.
practice, right? That's our practice to stop, to slow it down, to just be, to slow cook, whatever, whatever's
Mm-hmm.
delicious to you. I'm vegetarian, so I know a lot of slow cooking is meat. But there are other like slow cook beans. Beans take forever,
Right. Oh
right?
my
And
gosh, yes, they do.
and you
Yeah.
can have an instant pot. So that's okay.
Yeah, it's about holding both, isn't it?
It is. It
Yeah.
is.
One of the things, uh, yeah, this is bringing so much to mind. And I think that I'm having a real life moment of mindfulness right now because I have the tendency sometimes to like isolate and then I swirl around in my own brain and then I kind of hyperfixate a little bit and ruminate on how our society is slowly harming just all the things all the time. But the reason I know connection is so important is because I said, and here's this big thing, you have to have so much privilege to be able to be slow. And that's not true. I mean, to do it the way that the Instagrammers are doing it, right? Yeah, maybe. And then our connection and you reflecting back, like the wonderful mirror that I'm grateful to have, is like, and Ashley, by the way, right? We can choose. We are in choice sometimes. Society gets to do a lot of things to us, but it doesn't get to do everything. And we can choose where to insert that, even if it's just slowly washing your hands after slicing garlic really fast or something, right? And so I really appreciate you reflecting that back because I sometimes forget to, I let the kind of big, what are for me truth bombs, like just hang in the air. And I sometimes need my connections with other people to have the soft hands that's like, it's not a bomb, it's just a thing that's true. And we can hold it gently and make other choices too. So thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. And I think it's a both and. Like, I don't think you're wrong.
Totally.
I think, like, when you have lots of leisure time, you can do things leisurely, right? The thing
Yeah,
that buys us leisure time is the money,
it's so
right? And
true.
so it's real. So, I've often thought about this, especially about meditation. Who gets to go on retreat?
Hmm.
Right? Like, so I have a very privileged life that I get to go on retreats sometimes. And that's because I have money to pay for them and I can take time off,
Hmm.
right? Because I'm in enough of an income bracket that a week off is okay for me, right? Other people don't have that. And that's a luxury item, right?
Yeah.
That time and that resource it's real. So like I don't want to minimize that.
Hmm.
And, I know low income people that bake from scratch because they love it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right. I know people that are doing community gardening in really low income communities and doing that with the community, so it's a both and, right?
Hmm.
It's a radical act to pause and rest
Yeah.
and do things slowly, especially when the world is telling you you can't and you shouldn't. So you named something really important. I didn't want to minimize that, but it's a both and, right?
Totally. Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think you're highlighting too, again, I'm constantly monitoring these sort of things in my own brain. So, well, sometimes in a hypervigilant way, which is why I need mindfulness, and then sometimes in just my normal way, um, which also requires mindfulness practices. But like these manifestations of white dominant culture, white supremacy, like the all or nothing, and some of the saviorism, right? Like my mind in this moment is kind of like, are some of those things popping up? They always are. And thankfully, this is a thing that folks can choose to listen to. I'm hoping nothing I'm saying is super duper harmful, but just noticing those things for me is also a mindfulness practice, right? Like when I'm suspending in air the duality of, yes, it takes privilege to be able to do it to an extreme, I'll say, right? Um, and I'm not implying that about you being able to go on retreat. People should be able to take a week off and it not end them, but that's an America thing. Um, but and we're in choice at least some of the time. In me trying to uphold that, I wonder which parts of me are like upholding some of those manifestations. So it's just a
Yeah.
constant practice.
Yeah, and you're naming some really, really important things that, again, both and, right? Both and, yes, that's real, and yes, people are showing us resistance to that in every
Mhm.
moment, right?
Yeah.
Right? Which is wonderful and beautiful. I want to shift just a little bit to nurturing ourselves. So
Mm.
we talked a lot about nurturing those in our care. We even talked about kind of nurturing society and kind of but a lot of that is outward facing. And so I'm just curious about the role of nurturing of yourself and how that
Mm.
maybe plays into your mindfulness practice, maybe not. What does that look like for
Yeah.
you?
Have to name that intense feelings of imposter syndrome are coming up, because the nurturing of the self is, I think, for me, my hardest practice is knowing that I'm allowed to do that. I kind of made my entire identity as a young woman that I was a carer for others. And I think so many women um, who were conditioned as women, right? Like, oh, this is your role in society, is to do these things. And so it took me a really long time to understand that the nurturing of myself is sometimes recognizing that, like, all of the sayings we always hear, right? Like, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to put the oxygen mask on for yourself before another person. And they're fun cliche sayings for a reason, because they are true. And for me, I'll say that that's like the biggest struggle. And so coming onto a podcast and talking about mindfulness feels so official, that my brain's like, girl, you can't say crap about that. So, but it has in recent moments looked like, well, one really huge moment is after I graduated grad school, I had an interesting internship experience, and I was so incredibly burnt out from just, working since I was 16 years old, essentially, a little younger, but we don't tell people that because it's illegal. Um, but like working from 16 all the way until then, and just having this really harrowing time. I had some of the awareness because of my mindfulness practices to know that if I try to roll right into being a counselor immediately after graduating, I'm not going to be very effective, and I'm going to start burnt out. And pre-licensed counseling world can be really challenging for new graduates because um, there's just a lot of systemic things that I'm sure could be better, but the people implementing them are doing their best in the system they have to. I've landed at a really beautiful place, but I had to take a couple months off and that was a huge privilege to be able to do that. I was grateful for that, and in my quieter moments would just like be sending out so much gratitude into the universe that I was able to find that deep rest. We had just moved into a new home and had all of these things going on to get it kind of like to a point that we needed it to feel safe in here and all of that kind of thing. And so that felt like one of the most nurturing acts for myself, but I also am so grateful that I had like a partner who could sustain us for that few months. Um, I had the ability to do that. And so for me, it's really been like can we notice when our nervous system is running on E and is so frazzled beyond belief? And where can we put something down? Where can we gently press, right? Because sometimes with some of my own like neurodivergence and other such things that I've got going on in this mind and nervous system, like, you know, sometimes I can be like discomfort avoidant. Like, so where do I gently push to say, no, we're like actually a resilient being and we can be a little uncomfortable sometimes. And so they feel like these small things that I'm doing, like, maybe we rest. It's okay that we're not productive 100% of the time. It's a lot of that like deconditioning, or is that the right word? Well, deconstructing and whatever.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes
Yeah.
total sense. That makes total
Yeah.
sense. That's beautiful. And I think noticing, I heard, noticing what you need, checking in, and you did this amazing thing. Like you noticed you were burnt out and said, I need to pause and I need to rest. So that's amazing. And then also noticing where you are avoiding, and that care can actually mean pushing yourself to do something difficult.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, you just named so many beautiful, wonderful things in there that I think, yeah, that's fantastic for people to think about, like noticing when you need to just stop and rest, but noticing when care actually means pushing yourself to do something that you're avoiding that is difficult.
Yeah, truly. And I will say, just back to the points that we were talking about before, I would not have been able to notice and bring awareness to those things alone. And so I also think that some of the ways that we nurture ourselves as humans is remembering that we are like part of a whole, and like it's not a weakness the way that our society would like us to believe, to have to rely on someone. Um, and again, all of the thoughts and concessions for the way society has brainwashed for centuries that like do it on your own, and that's like meritocracy all the way, like all of that kind of thing, but this ability to recognize this was reflected to me from my partner and my best friends, my own counselor. um you know I would not have been able to do these things and witness myself in that kind of state to be like, whoa, like this is not going to be good for us. um I say us, me and all the different me's inside of my brain. Um, if it hadn't been reflected, that's why I like to verbalize that folks are mirrors for me. So that they can understand that this is what humans are and that this is how I'm seeing you, right? It's not all about me, but it's about this reciprocity. You're reflecting back to me when I'm forgetting who I am or what I'm doing or what I'm needing or when I'm not able to be present. And I'm just so, so lucky that I've got it like dialed in pretty well about who my mirrors are, so to speak. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. And so that's a nurturing for myself too, like allowing myself to love these humans and allowing myself to be loved by them and witnessed by them in all of the strange, messy, and beautiful ways that all of us show up. And I'm in my late 30s, I guess. And so some of that came with just time and like earning experience. Um, because when I was 24, none of my friends were like, whoa, we look really burnt out. We were like, let's go out again 3 nights in a row, baby. Like, this is what you do, right? We're mirroring different kind of priorities then. So having this experience of being like, these people see me, I'm letting them see me, they're letting me see them, that's an act of nurturing too, in my mind.
I feel like you brought us full circle back to connection. Yeah. Yeah. Which I think is a great spot to land as we begin to wrap up. So
Yeah.
you've mentioned a couple of things in the podcast, like positive discipline, and I'm curious, even if it's not that, if there is well, you also mentioned oh gosh, I'm not going to get it right because I didn't write it down, but the theory of counseling that you love, the
Yeah.
relational.
Relational cultural theory.
Thank
Yeah.
you. So those are great resources for people to kind of Google. Do you
Yeah.
have anything else we could end on that could be a resource that people could maybe it's a mindfulness resource or maybe it's another resource because you have vast experience in, child care
Hmm.
and now counseling. So yeah, what would you love to leave us with, Ashley?
Oh, that's such a hard one because I'm so not like my brain collects things and then the details attached to them sometimes don't keep them. I know if you, yeah, definitely do some Googling on like responsive and nurturing parenting.
Great.
Because that's good even if you're not a parent, right?
Yes.
Definitely if you're counseling minded and you want to learn a little bit more about relational cultural theory, it's based in a feminist approach to counseling. And so that's there. But this is cheeky. So if you'll allow me,
Yeah, please.
you'll allow me to be a little puckish and cheeky. Um, I think that yes, I went to books and resources for all of these things, but I also just looked at the people in front of me and tried to not have any attachment for how they were supposed to be, especially children. So if you've got little tiny friends in your life, they're practicing mindfulness without even knowing it all the time because they're just being authentic and they are create a boy are they creative in how they get their needs met. And so I know it's not an exact place to go, but there are kids all around us all the time, and they deserve reverence as teachers. And that is, I think, the most important thing that I'm on the planet for is to just keep revering them, keep learning from them, and keep like kind of exalting them into this high place in society because our society is so rampant with childism and but the resources are there in front of us, right? Their curiosity is always there, their joy is always there, their sadness is always there, just all of the pieces. And so it's kind of, it's a resource that's ever abundant, and we have to try to not look creepy about it.
Well, I love that you brought the idea of reverence in. That's like quite a beautiful thing to end on that we could invite anyone listening to just ponder like what does that mean to bring reverence into our relationships with children, but I would say like into our relationships with other humans.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that feels like a wonderful invitation for folks and a beautiful place to end. So I would just like to thank you, Ashley, for spending this time with me and sharing your stories and wisdom and beautiful energy.
No, thank you for having me. This was so fun. I really appreciate the space to offer any of this. So thank you so much.
Say Something Studios.